down the street. Same old thing we did last week. Not a thing to do but shut up and listen to Raph on the Forest Creek podcast. You know the show.
Hello, Wisconsin!
And you know the guy, that's me. I'm the guy. And the show is the Forest Creek podcast. I'm here with another guy.
That's me.
Matt.
Matt, the other guy.
The other guy. We did record something together before. It was a kind of a review of the first season of, what's that show called?
Lord of the Rings, the lost episode of the Forest Creek.
It was, it's in the Lord of the Rings world, but it's called...
Rings of Power.
The Rings of Power. Yeah.
There we go. Not very memorable.
No. But we will put that episode out before the second season of The Rings of Power comes to be, if it doesn't, meet a horrible, tragic end, which is hilarious because hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And yeah. But that's a story for another time, children. Today we're going to talk about a decade. We're going to talk about the 90s. Specifically,
baby, the 90s.
If you recognize the song that I was singing at the opening of this, it was actually the opening to both shows, that 70s show and that 90s show that is basically a reboot. So to kind of lay some background here, that 70s show was a show that was popular during the 2000s. It was basically what were people like when they were hanging out 30 years back. It was produced by Tommy Chong, one half of the infamous stoner duo Cheech and Chong.
Oh, sick. I didn't know that.
And the actors on it, Topher Grace, Ashton Kutcher, Mila Kunis, there was a few other people, but that kind of launched their careers because they came into it as kids, and then afterwards they went off to make, big movies and all that stuff. Honestly, I only remember Topher Grace from Spider-Man 3.
Who was he in Spider-Man 3?
He was Eddie Brock to Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker. He was like the Venom before Tom Hardy. Yeah, so that was Topher Grace. Ashton Kutcher, Days of Our Lives, probably a couple of rom-coms or whatever. Mila Kunis, kind of same deal, lots of rom-coms. She actually the voice of Meg in Family Guy, if you didn't know. Yeah, which is really funny because like Meg, somebody who's famously ugly, and then
Shut up, Meg.
Mila Kunis, someone who's like famously beautiful. So it's like interesting, that kind of dynamic. But when they were kids, they got on that 70s show, and that's kind of what launched their careers. I don't know what the others went to do, but the show more or less is about a group of kids hanging out in their friend's basement. Eric Foreman was the name of the leading character. And it was a coming-of-age TV show where every season is another year in the 70s, and they're just constantly going through them. They're experiencing the things that kids did in the 70s. They're it's a stoner comedy to a big degree. They famously have this bit in the show where they will put a camera in the center of a table and then rotate it 360, like 90 degrees. Here's another character, 90 degrees, here's another character, 90 degrees, here's another character. So the four people sitting on four sides of the table, and all of them are getting high. And they never show weed, and they never show that stuff. They'll like put a little bit of smoke in the air to kind of suggest it. But honestly, if you didn't know that's what they were doing, you'd never would have guessed. You're like, they're just sitting around a table being silly or being introspective for a moment. And it was, to be honest, I think it was one of the most popular shows that had stoner comedy in it.
When did that 70s show come out? 90s?
Early 2000s.
Really?
Yeah, it was like majority throughout the 2000s. They ran for like, I want to say 8 seasons. I'm just going to look this up real quick. How many seasons did that 70s show go for? 8 seasons. 8
According
seasons.
to Wikipedia, that 70s show is an American comedy television series that originally aired on Fox for 200 episodes and 4 specials across 8 seasons, from August 23, 1998 to May 18, 2006.
All right,
Thanks, Siri. You're a babe.
So you're right. Yeah, it was the 90s. It came out in 98. And then last week...
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you. Could you please repeat?
First off, I was talking to the Google lady. Shut up, Siri. That's what you get for not letting my podcast on Apple. To be fair, like I tried going through their process, but they're like, well, you need to verify your Apple ID. And it's like, it's just taking forever. Everywhere else is like, just put RSS up here. Well, we'll chart it out. It's all good. On topic, that 90s show, Netflix bought the rights to the show, and they have rebooted it, basically. So it's the same thing, but now that we're in 2020, the show is about the 90s, in the same way that when they were in the 2000s, the show was about the 70s.
Yeah.
Right? It's still produced by Tommy Chong. What they did to bring the show back was actually they got a lot of the older actors coming back. So the new pitch is basically the same old couple who are Mr. and Mrs. Foreman, Red and Kitty, who were Eric's parents from the original show. They're now grandparents.
Okay.
And Eric is a dad bringing his daughter over to stay at their home for the summer.
Gotcha.
So the first season of the show has spanned over the summer, as his daughter is kind of going through many of the same experiences that he went through. Nerdy kid who's fallen in with a group of lovable misfits, and now they're having a summer. They're trying drugs, they're drinking beer, they're going off the water fountain. She's trying to have her first summer romance. The summer romance plays a really big role in it, and it's a lot of coming of age stuff. But in the 90s now, what comes to mind for you in the 90s?
Oh, Pokemon.
Really?
Pokemon, huge, yeah. All the, got my first Pokemon, like, Game Boy when I was, like, 6. So just 99. Wow. And, yeah.
Wait, so what year were you born?
94.
94. Millennial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel like that 90s show would strike me a lot harder if it was, like, something like the Rugrats. But then they wouldn't really be able to do much with the beer and drugs without the show being a little bit more controversial.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in seeing, like, just the, all the stuff, like, you got the Walkmans,
just the emergence of mass media technology.
Yeah.
Because the internet is a thing. That's one of the episodes that they have in the show is the old lady, Kitty Foreman. Mm-hmm. She's sitting down and learning how to use a computer. They keep making the jokes like, the president can see you through this. Everybody look. Yeah, it's the emergence of mass media technology. A lot of the modern things that we work with now, they were born in the 90s. Even just the way we do, like, our TV celebrity culture was big then, right? We didn't necessarily have social media back then, but we were starting to have the internet. In the background, somebody cracks a joke about it at one point, like, the Iraq War is going on, which is like the beginnings of Americans just hearing about the Middle East constantly, like they do now. Or because the 90s, a lot of people attributed it, they were like, that's the height of American empire. It's mass commercialism, right? Everybody has figured out how to be a consumer now.
They say what year that 90s show is based in? Like,
not exactly.
No, okay.
No.
They just tease around the 90s.
The last show, the 70s show, basically it ended on the turn of the new year from the 70s to the 80s.
Oh, that's cool.
So that kind of started in 1972 and went to 1980. So I think we can kind of ballpark it that it's like 91, 92 or something.
Depends on how many seasons they decide to go for.
However many seasons Netflix is thinking of going.
Yeah. If you get canceled on 3, then it was 97.
They do one cool thing in that 70s show, because the 70s is when the first Star Wars movies started to come out. So as soon as that happens, the main character Eric becomes a huge Star Wars nerd.
And that's why he's teaching the Star Wars course now with his daughter Leia.
That's exactly it. Yes.
That's funny.
Names his daughter Leia. Marries his sweetheart from the 70s show, the girl who used to live next door
Spoilers.
to. Not really. Show's been out 30 years, man. I don't know. Get over yourself. Yeah, that's also like the first episode of the 90s show.
Yeah.
But we see a lot of the old characters, a lot of the old actors return. IGN gave that show about a 7 out of 10, which, most sitcoms, if they're good, are a 7 out of 10. It's very easy for a sitcom to be bad.
IGN does Netflix show ratings now?
IGN rates everything that they get money to rate.
Fair enough.
And they'll rate it higher if they get more money. But their overall take was, it was fun, it was entertaining as sitcoms go, but it relied too much on the old cast. And I can kind of see that, right? Because a major part of the show is the old couple who were old to us when they were in that 70s show. And now 30 years later, to be honest, they look great. The actors...
That's what really confused me, because I started the show and I saw them there and I was like, they look the same as they did, am I watching the right show?
Yeah, it's like they didn't change at all.
Yeah.
They didn't move out of 1950, let alone 70. They're still practically the same attitudes and all that stuff. The dad, Red Foreman, constantly making that joke, I'm gonna kick your ass. Which is, it's not the way that Hank Hill makes that joke. I'm gonna kick your ass. It's just constantly saying it all the time, you know. So that was really interesting to see them kind of come back into that. And then the old actors keep popping up. Ashton Kutcher's in it. Mila Kunis shows up. The guy who played Fez is kind of interesting. He shows up again, has like his own subplot a little bit. I don't know, what did you see a lot of that 70s show?
Almost nothing. I've seen like clips here and there.
Yeah. So
I'm a sci-fi guy. I'm more likely to watch Star Wars and stuff like What's His Face from that 70s than I am to watch that 70s show.
I used to be a sitcom-aholic. I'd seen a lot of sitcoms. And because I think it was in high school, we had a writing teacher who did an entire unit about the evolution of the family and the writing that went around the family. So that show, what we did in that unit was basically we watched episodes of TV from like every decade, different shows, from like all the way back to Leave It to Beaver and I Love Lucy, all like, and then we watched, you know, this family and that family, and then just watching it evolve through the decades. That 70s show was a really great example of that because it's literally a show made in the 90s that, well, started making in the 90s that went back to the 70s. And this is an interesting one because it's made in 2020s, going all the way back to the 90s. So just watching those decades go back, one of the first things a lot of people tend to notice about that is the evolution of the dad in the TV show. Dads in TV shows used to, like, the subplots and like everything that would happen, all the problems in the show would happen from the kids, they would happen from the mom. And then the show would end with the dad coming in and restoring order to the household, right? It was a very serious, morally centered character. And over time, the dads became more and more loose to the point where if you watch a Family Channel show, like if you turn on Wizards of Waverly Place, the dad is a goofball. Yeah, he's a goofball. Yeah. You know, they're constantly making gags about him. Even if you go back to the
Modern
90s.
Family, too.
Modern Family is a great example.
Yeah, love Phil. Oh.
Yeah, Modern Family was actually what we ended the unit on.
Yeah?
Yeah, we watched the last things we were watching was like in the 2010s. So that was around when Modern Family was really big. So we watched that. And first off, I love the way Modern Family's written. They do great. They are awesome. It deserved every season it got, and it's over now, but great television. Even for that, like, my dad is kind of a conservative person, but he likes Modern Family because it was a good portrayal of it. It's kind of funny. One big thing about Modern Family that struck a chord with a lot of people is that, like, it normalized having a gay married couple and their family on TV.
Yeah.
It's funny that the show is actually made in other parts of the world where that's not okay, and then they just kind of make it out to be two goofy roommates or something.
Wait, really?
It's there's like a Serbian remake of Modern Family that does practically the same plots and everything, but they just pretend it's two uncles living together or something. Yeah. So
like they literally just take like everything from Modern Family, put their own actors in, and then change it a little bit. Like,
yeah. It's actually very common with like it's actually very common with a lot of film and TV studios around the world. Like I saw an Arabic remake of Are We There Yet? The movie with Ice Cube. Beat for beat, the same exact movie, but with Egyptian people, all of them speaking Arabic. Like the exact, even the deer showing up and like, I don't know, the guy getting his crotch hit by like a statue and all this, literally the same movie.
So kind of like taking subtitles to the extremes.
Yeah, it's like we're gonna sub the actors.
Sub movies.
Yeah, sub movies. But that 90s show and looking back at the decades and the way that it evolved was very interesting. They have a new cast going. That 70s show, the cast was very simple. It was Eric Foreman, kind of a nerd. He had a friend who always wore sunglasses that he was like his conspiracy theory friend. Kind of cool, but, you know, romantically uninvolved, which was kind of like a nice break from the rest of the characters who are constantly romantically involved. You have this boyfriend-girlfriend duo who are Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, and, you know, he's like the supposed Chad of his high school, and then she's like, you know, the popular girl who has to be with that guy. You know, they might not even be a good fit for each other, right? You have kind of just the redhead hippie girl who lives next door to Eric and is his crush, you know, that romantic on and off.
But is this that
series.
70s or that 90s?
That 70s, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
because I was going to say, you're basically describing the daughter from that 90s in the first 30 seconds there.
Right, who else was there? Oh yeah, and let's not forget the ethnically ambiguous foreign exchange student who is with them the whole time, Fez. Who's my favorite character on the show? He's like weirdly Spanish the whole time, and has always doing that accent, but you can't ever actually place where it is he's from, and they never reveal it on the show. But what's funny is that like it's an interesting point to like hinge the cast on, because they started with an ethnically ambiguous metrosexual, and now they have an ethnically ambiguous kind of Asian homosexual in the new cast. They have like an openly gay kid in it, and then they have, the punk next door girl who's like the best friend of Leia Foreman, their new central character, who is equally as big of a nerd as her father was, just in different directions. It's not cool to be a nerd about Star Wars in the 90s, I guess.
That was a sad time.
Was it?
No.
Apparently it was cool to be a nerd about Pokemon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, near the end of it. Yeah.
Near the end of the 90s. Yeah.
I think people watched Star Trek and stuff back then. There was plenty to be a nerd about. What if that's like what I'm calling it right now? That's one of the big plots in the upcoming thing, is that she falls in love with Star Trek, but her dad is really into Star Wars, and it's like a major controversy throughout the show.
Heartbreaking for him.
I don't care.
Warhammer's where it's at.
And they also have basically the descendant of Ashton Kutcher, who's like the pretty boy of the new school, famously a Kelso, which means that he's the heartbreaker, the kind of airhead that will be around with all the girls but never settle down with one, and it'll just be a story of tragedies. Something like that.
So that's the Kelso family?
Yeah, and then they also do have the boyfriend-girlfriend duo. Yeah. Who is like, again, popular, smart girl who's gonna go places.
And the Jersey guy.
Yeah, Jersey guy.
Jersey.
I don't even want to say Chad, because he's kind of not a Chad. Being a Chad means you don't care. This guy cares too much.
A Brad.
He's a Brad. Isn't that sad? I like that. I saw a leveling thing of it. Is like you start out as a Brad, and then you level up to Chad, and then you go up to Thad.
Whoa.
That's like college Chad. And then once you go up like one step further, that's Vlad.
Vlad, next three I'm failing.
But it's interesting because the 90s was also like 90s, 2000s. That's when people still believed in the high school caste system of like, there are jocks, there are pumpkins, there are nerds, When I was in high school, that was kind of falling apart.
Yeah?
Yeah, I was in high school in the 2010s. Well, I got into high school in 2010, left in 2015, and it was like nobody cared about that. You could be anything, and you could float between groups. So like that caste system was kind of a joke. It was the Mean Girls plot, but it never went anywhere, right? I don't know, when you were going to high school, what year did you graduate?
2012.
2012.
Yeah.
Did you ever experience a high school caste system?
No, I went to a horribly small private prison school, so there wasn't enough people to have a caste system.
It was Christian.
Yeah. It was a cult.
You guys were all kind of inmates rather than in groups. Yeah, but that was...
It was on a farm, and it used to be a camp that they purchased so they could lock us away.
Did you ever see The Breakfast Club?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was one of those movies that really drove home the fact that there was a caste system, which is funny because the plot of The Breakfast Club is the kids in that movie see through their caste system and become friends by the end of it. They just share feelings and they bond over this detention period. But like people would see that and then think, I'm a bender, you're a what's-her-face, all that stuff, and just be like, I'm the burnout kid, you're the jock, you're the pretty girl, you're the nutcase, and all this stuff. And people would kind of cling to that stuff like it's their identity.
So you think that almost kind of like helped revitalize and keep it going kind of thing?
I think people still thought it was real for a while. And the truth of the matter is that it was never real. That if you were aware of the fact that that was true, you could just kind of like float between the groups. You could take the best of all worlds.
Society's a construct.
I think the caste system is a construct. I'm not going to say society. Just things that make sense that they exist. But like, let's for instance take this idea of the jock.
Okay.
Why does the jock exist? Why does the jock class of high school society exist? Well, if you're playing football and you spend a lot of time with your football team, and it's a big part of the morale of being on the football team that you spend a lot of time with them, and that you guys kind of create your own culture, and it becomes a little bit more homogenized, and you're known for that around the school. We had guys in our school, they all wore the Letterman jackets when they were on the sports team, right? It's like if you're wearing a uniform that indicates you're a member of that societal caste.
Yeah.
And then because you are, the testosterone-fueled athlete, usually those guys tend to be a little bit fitter, better looking. They tend to be more charismatic. So they evolve into this kind of stereotype, right? Not necessarily because, they're genetically disposed to do it, but because they were, they were conditioned into it. And not like maliciously. Like nobody put them in a lab and went, we're going to keep running this test until he turns into a jock and puts on a Letterman jacket. No, it was that's just the culture you ended up coming up in. I think the same thing is true of a lot of those so-called castes. But the funny thing is that when I was in high school, the biggest nerds I knew were the ones in the Letterman jackets. It was the guy who spent all day on Reddit, would put on the jacket, and then go play rugby after school. It's like, that's it. It wasn't like, there was no jock class. There were a few burnouts, yeah. There were kids that went out and smoked weed after class or whatever, or there were kids who spent their time doing nerdier things, and there were friend groups, but people floated between there all the time. I was a theater kid. I didn't belong in theater at all.
So do you think it started to dissolve exactly while you were in high school? Or maybe it's always kind of been like that, and just you notice this while you're experiencing it, and then maybe that kind of, how kind of like details of the past can be lost, Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think the truth behind it is that it was never really real. By the time we kind of entered the Obama years, what ended up happening was that being inclusive became cool. So it was no longer cool to be exclusive in your caste. It became cool to be inclusive. And then that just eroded the borders of who was cool and who wasn't. And it flipped the whole world upside down. The nerdy, artsy kids became cool. And a lot of the jock, people who stayed in their stereotypes, kind of receded into the background. And when I was in elementary school, I knew, I would talk to other kids about it. So we all had an expectation that things were going to be like that. And then by the time we get to grade 8 and we're just going through the motions, going through class to class, because in my town, my part of town at least, up to grade 7 was elementary school. So from 1 to 7 we were in the same school, and then high school was 8 to 12. So as soon as we cross that threshold, it takes a little while, but then you kind of realize, oh, none of that's true. Yeah.
This was all nonsense. We're going to work. It's, to me, by the end of high school, I was like, I just show up and sit in the same cubicle every day, practically. And I'm friends with everybody around me in that cubicle, whether or not they're a jock or the pretty girl or whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. We had something like that with, I remember this from talking with Jake, when we started getting into the higher grades. We hit grade 11, he's like, all right, who are we going to protect, from the lower grades, stop from bullying, right? And I was like, Jake, the assholes graduated. I mean, nobody. We're just not going to bully the younger
You just
kids.
look at each other like, we're the bullies now.
Jake's like, all right, we're the bullies. And I'm like, Jake, no.
It's funny. Did you ever have experiences with bullying in school?
Oh, yeah. There was, lots of different things from either myself or watching friends. Like, there was this one kid, Jonah. He was a couple grades below us, but he'd pick on Spencer a lot. And my mom always gave me these little, just like things like Hershey Kisses and small little chocolates like that, little eggs. I'd always get a few of those in my lunch. I almost never ate them because I'd see Jonah approaching Spencer and I would just whip those things and smoke that kid in the head with little chocolates.
But that was like you were the hero in that story. You took revenge on the bully.
Yeah.
I never really had a bully.
No.
What was really funny to me is one time in elementary school, I got pulled in to sit with a lot of the kids who were bullies, essentially. I don't think they thought themselves as bullies. I don't think they thought that they were bugging or bullying anybody intentionally. They were just kind of being rude. They were kind of being obnoxious to people. And there was this one kid I'll never forget. This one kid named Johnny had moved over to our school, and he had an accent. He was like from Taiwan or something. He still had a bit of a struggle with English. He had an interesting dress sense. He had long hair, and he kind of looked like he was from the 70s. That was, and he always wore Calvin Klein stuff, and we never really knew why. He had a yellow jacket that made him kind of look like, our teacher actually said it made him look like a little bit of a duck, like a rubber duck. And the class would laugh. And our teacher would even say, like, be a man, Johnny, and that kind of caught on as a catchphrase. I don't think our teacher knew what he was doing, but he sowed the seeds in these other obnoxious kids to do that stuff to him constantly.
Yeah.
And it turned into, I was like, this is kind of bullying. Like, but then for some reason they called me in here to sit with these kids so that the principal could give us a talking to about bullying this kid. And this is the principal's reasoning, is like, you never know what somebody's gonna be like. You never know what gifts they have. Johnny's dad works for Calvin Klein. I have to save up to buy Calvin Klein shirts. It's like, what? And then at the same time,
am I in here because you want a shirt? Is that what this is?
Like, all these kids, they're like they're going back and forth with the principal, and then they would look at me like, why is Raphael here? Like, 'cause even they were like, what is going on? I was like, I think I've spoken like 2 sentences to Johnny the whole time he's been here. I don't even know.
These kids are like, I just punched a dude in the teeth. Raph was just walking in the hall.
Well, like, these kids, some of them were obnoxious to me.
Yeah.
They would like make fun of me for something. They'd be like, oh, you're Egyptian, you live in a pyramid, huh? Like that kind of stuff.
So do you, Raph?
Well, yes, but
You heard it here, folks.
it's funny, when I got to later grades, I think between 9th and 10th grade, I had like a charisma breakthrough. I think in my mind, I went nuts. I just abandoned all of the shy politeness I used to hold on to.
Yeah.
And I became quick-witted. I didn't realize how smart I was with wit.
Yeah.
So when it came time to sling insults, I was like faster than other kids. And I was like more vicious to it too. It made me cold and callous around these other kids.
You're like, I have a trigger finger and I've got bullets.
There came a time where I was sitting next to the same kid in history class in grade 12. And every day, every move he made towards me, I would turn on him like a weapon. And it's not like I didn't like him, but I never said I don't like you. I just kept being terrible to him.
Yeah.
And then walking away from that class on like the last week of school before we do our exams and stuff, I was like, oh, I've been a bully this whole time. Like, it just clicked in.
Yeah.
I would take it back if I knew that I was like truly making people's lives more miserable, but I also kind of look at it and be like, it's high school, get over it. It's like, why did you... Nobody should have really hinged that much of their identity on who they were when they were a teenager.
Well,
But
I mean, the
when you're...
people who do, peak in high school's saying for a reason. So
I hope they change. I just hope they change, because I thought, maybe what if this is the height of fun? And it's really not. It's like a blip. It's just that when you are in high school, it's all you have.
Yeah.
It's your whole life, which is part of, if you ask me, it's kind of part of the problem with school. We put way too much of a weight on that social circle, on your performance at this academic standard.
why wouldn't they teach me to do taxes, prepare me for what I wanted to do with my life?
I feel bad for this because we had a class where they tried to teach us these concepts.
Yeah.
Save money. This is a checking account and stuff like that. They organized the student set in that way terribly. So it was like a lot of obnoxious kids distracting the teacher. The kids who wanted to pay attention were not able to. They hardly taught us how to write a cover letter.
Ours didn't even. The only thing we had was a planning course where we had to talk about our inspirations, aspirations, all that stuff. And stuff that helped us and inspired us. And one of mine, being eternally stuck in 2006, was My Chemical Romance, right? As one of the emo clan members.
Now, was 2006 when My Chemical Romance was most popular?
Oh, baby. 2006, you got 1X from 3 Days of Grace. You got Billy Talent 2. Oh, what else? And you got the Black Parade, of course. That was when you would flick on the radio and you've got Famous Last Words by My Chemical Romance. You got Riot by 3 Days of Grace. Oh, what a time to be alive. Yeah, truly the best years of music.
You're kind of reminding me, in that 70s show, they have an episode where the cool kid with the sunglasses is falling in love with a girl at the same time that he's being introduced to metal. Because that's when it was born, metal music. Yeah. So there's metal music, and then throughout the 80s, punk kind of emerges, and then it gets big in the 90s, and we get stuff like grunge too. So the rebellious side, the alternative groups of music.
Yeah.
Something that I think probably the breeding ground for things like My Chemical Romance.
Which is and then the only thing that came out of that course, they ignored all of my stuff that I wanted to do with my life, and they're like, I got pulled into the principal's office. We need to talk about why this influences you. Do you have a romance with chemicals? Like, I listen to sad music. I don't do drugs yet.
It's like, this is pushing me to
But
work.
it's pushing me to drugs.
Because you were in a private school, you probably didn't do the D.A.R.E program.
No, I did that in elementary school though.
Right.
Yeah.
Drug abuse resistance education.
Yeah, I still I have that ruler actually, and I've used the D.A.R.E ruler to roll joints.
It's funny to think about that the reason why the D.A.R.E program no longer exists, I think, is because they had a spike where, all the kids are being more informed, but then they had long-term data after a while, and they were like, oh,
Hell
they're
yeah.
more likely to do drugs because we showed them this.
Yeah.
Because I think the problem is, like, if you never talk about the positive of something and you only talk about negatives, when somebody's exposed to something like drugs and they try it, they get over that hump of the peer pressure or whatever, and they try it and they're like, oh, there's positivity. So all the negative stuff must have been a lie.
Because they never told me about this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
That's really interesting.
that's probably it's just an estimation. I'm not a sociologist, but
Yeah.
that's not a real degree anyway. But yeah, I was the last generation to do it.
Drugs? Or
No, certainly not. But the D.A.R.E
Today.
program, I still remember, it was Constable Holly Marks, the cop who would show up to give us the D.A.R.E lesson in 5th grade. And every time she left, all we had was more questions. Like, so how many cigarettes do you have to smoke to get cancer? And stuff like that. Like, we're always trying to find where the line is and stuff like that. Like, all the kids would have been like, oh, we'll never, it was always incomprehensible to me, even in high school, that like anybody would ever do cocaine or meth or any of this stuff. Like, there were points in high school where I was like feeling low enough to be like, I would try drugs, but I have no idea where even to start buying them. Like, who do I contact? I don't do any drugs. I'm super clean.
we're drinking water.
Yes. Actually, yeah. What else are we drinking today?
Johnnie Walker Blue Label.
My favorite scotch. My favorite. I was telling you beforehand, and this is a good tip for a lot of the higher end, the topper shelf of alcohols, is that sometimes you do need to put a little bit of water in them to activate them, because the ingredients don't dissolve all the way. Just a little fun fact if you happen to also be enjoying some top shelf whiskey with us as we do this podcast. But yeah, music was a big decade, like, generational thing, because it was all like beep-a-da-boop in the 50s. And then I think the 50s is when somebody like Chuck Berry broke through. Chuck Berry's like one of the first famous black guitar players.
What if I
was
take a
on TV.
guitar and I go like this?
Like you can, and it, if you listen to his stuff, you're like, that's rock. But like Johnny Be Good, and the way he played the guitar in that was like revolutionary. And it inspired people in the 60s like Jimi Hendrix, who was huge for the 60s. Like, the boomers love Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
I love Jimi Hendrix. He's my favorite.
I still got the vinyl you gave me.
Oh, yeah, baby.
Yeah.
I love Jimi Hendrix. And then the 70s, like the Beatles. The Beatles were big through in the 60s and the 70s. And they had this interesting change. Because if you look at the Beatles in the 60s, it's bowl cuts, it's suits. They all look prim and clean, and they all look like the same person. And then the 70s roll around, the long hair comes out. They came back from their trip to India. It's like the open collar shirts and all this stuff, right?
Lennon's got the round glasses.
Yeah. What is it? The 80s Metallica, stuff like that comes out.
With their bowl cut hair. I just saw a clip of an interview with the other day. They're walking away, and this guy's like, fans are saying your haircuts aren't very American. What do you think about that? He's like, well, it's very apt of them. I mean, we're not American, so
We're British.
He's like,
I'm
good
trying to
eye.
remember. There was like an American band that also came up around the same time, Monkeys.
Yeah.
Something? Yeah.
Arctic Monkeys.
No, they came. Those are the new group.
Yeah.
I'm talking like the Monkeys, like Monkees. Yeah.
Oh,
those guys came up
pre-Arctic. Okay.
way pre-Arctic. They were around the same time as the Beatles. Arctic Monkeys are like Arctic Monkeys are the Radiohead generation. That's where we landed in the 90s. I can't wait for that 90s show episode where Leia discovers Radiohead.
Nice.
Radiohead.
Season 2, baby.
Yeah, because Radiohead was like, My music is a lot of this. Radiohead's great. I'm not hating on Radiohead, but it's a lot of that. And then the Radiohead inspired bands that kind of led into the early 2000s were like Coldplay, definitely. Arctic Monkeys, I think, was probably in that same group. But
What year would that be? Well, I guess you said 90s, but
late 90s to early 2000s, yeah.
And then late 90s, I'm pretty sure 99, we get the first 3 Days Grace album. And so it begins.
Yeah, which is interesting because my tastes are on the opposite end of that.
Yeah.
Not the opposite end, the other side of the coin was hip hop music. Because like 90s rap, 80s and 90s rap got big. You know, we went from NWA and then those guys broke off and there was Death Row Records and there was Ice Cube was dropping albums and Dre was dropping and
Vanilla
Snoop Dogg
Ice.
got big. Vanilla Ice was in the mix. Don't hate on Vanilla Ice, man. Everybody loves Ice Ice Baby. Yeah. Which is kind of the beat from Under Pressure by Queen, but you know, also. But at the same time, it's like, and then in the early 2000s, it's like MTV Cribs. There's not a lot of white people on MTV Cribs. It's like, you want to come into Little John's house? But yeah, that was like the time where Dre was like the king of hip hop and he was producing people like Eminem and all that stuff. And early 2000s was Eminem. And a lot of these hip hop artists and rap music and all that stuff got big and it stayed big into the 2010s. And now we have people like the Island Boys and Doja Cat. No, I don't really listen to them, but you know, that's
Never really heard of them, but I mean, music's my favorite part of like identifying a generation kind of thing in like a decade.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. Somebody was telling me earlier, is like, I don't listen to enough new hip hop. I was like, maybe you're right. So I just dug up a song at random and I ended up digging out a Travis Scott song. I'm trying to remember. It wasn't Stargaze, it was someone else.
It would be lost on me anyways.
Yeah, but it was like the beat hit me on that. I was like, this is so good. It's like not everything that they make that's new appeals to me, but like, those new people are really talented. You can't just say it's all electronic now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a lot of engineering to get the sound the way they do.
Yeah, if anyone could do it, there'd be a lot more.
It's like, you think Billie Eilish is just going up there and, you know, whimpering about Satan, but her brother is a genius when it comes to sound engineering. Like, truly, her songs are very masterfully put together. You know, she's like, I just want to light myself on fire. But, like, it's an amazing chorus and, like, bridge.
No, they created a style for her, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, for sure.
But like that, trying the music and stuff, I've just been listening to our Can't Find Her 4 playlist a whole bunch because between you, Jared, and Josh, I get a whole bunch of new hip hop stuff. And
Yeah, you get like a really diverse taste of music from four of us. And what I always find interesting is the things we end up sharing. You know, like when a dubstep song I pick off of Josh, or vice versa, or like a blues song that Jared and I will get into, or something.
Or Generation by Jesse Royal. Everybody's favorite new reggae song.
God forbid Jared gets us into David Usher.
He can try. It's not happening.
He'll do a solo episode of this show just talking about David Usher at some point.
They'll literally steal the equipment and be like, David Usher. Have to listen.
But that's that 90s show, that 70s show, them 90s kids, those 70s kids. Do you, like, they say the line is like 1997, and I'm born 1997. I'm on the latter end of 90, because my birthday's in November. So I'm kind of like the first generation of Zoomers.
Yeah.
And then being in between being a millennial and a Zoomer at the same time. So I'm at the intersection. I don't necessarily belong in any one definite group.
Yeah. You know what I think best defines our generation is the born in the 90s generation, right? We got that crisp outdoor childhood, you know, like on a summer day, I'm biking with my friends to go get a slushie from the gas station, right? Walkman strapped onto my shorts, right? And
we were one of the last generations to put wires in your earbuds.
Yeah.
Or that had wires.
But just that it's the primarily outdoor childhood kind of thing.
Yes.
But then the second it's kind of important, the developing years are coming, we get phones, internet, stuff like that.
Yes.
Just in time to be corrupted and have all that act like just enough to be able to like really grow up in this beginning of this like flourishing tech world.
Do you remember your first phone?
Oh yeah, I got a flip phone, a black Razor.
Oh, you had one of those sleek little thin things, right?
Oh,
Motorola.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, first time I ever stole from my parents too. Because I used the internet on that phone to download the Welcome to the Black Parade as a ringtone. I spent like $2 on it.
Oh my god.
And it snuck by under the credit card. They had no idea.
When I was a kid, I used to borrow my mom's flip phone, which was like an inch thick Samsung flip phone. When it was closed, it had an extendable antenna. There was no color in the screen. Like,
black and white.
People don't
like the OG Game
understand
Boys.
what that means.
Yeah.
To have no color in the screen.
It's just a funny green, right?
Yeah, it's like this funny green, and there's like black, and when you touch the buttons, it has a blue backlight. That was like a huge deal back then.
So you could see what you were clicking?
It had 10 ringtones. Whoa. And I went from that. The first phone that was mine was like one of those, it was a slide phone. I don't remember who made it, but it was like, it would slide sideways to expose a QWERTY keypad so you could text faster.
I remember Jared had one of those.
Remember buttons were a big deal?
Yeah,
and
the BlackBerry Torch was huge.
Now it's like, God forbid there's a button on your phone. It's like Apple does not know what to do with it.
Eventually the volume buttons and the power buttons are going to have to go.
I was showing my little, my little cousins are actually born later than the Generation Zoomer. I don't know what that generation's called yet, but I was trying to explain to her what an iPod Nano was, and that it had no screen. And then it was just this tiny thing with a bunch of buttons on it.
No, you're thinking of the Shuffle, the little square?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't that a Nano?
No, the Nano was the little rectangle.
And it had a screen, yeah.
Because that was my last iPod.
And then showing her that, and then being like, and here was the first iPhone. And she's like, what's that square? Like, people don't remember there was a menu button on the front of the iPhone that had a little square on it. And now it's gone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That was like the first few generations. Now they don't bother with it
Yeah.
anymore.
So at first it was the iPod Touch, and then...
Now they're like, it's a waste of space.
Yeah.
Get rid of it.
Yeah. And they're like, this iPod Touch, that's oddly phone-shaped. What if?
It's like, this was, people experimented quickly with phones once they got it off the wire. They were like, let's put it in the car. Let's put this brick with a giant antenna in the car. I love those things, man. I'm really curious about what it's going to look like when that 90s show stumbles on it. I'm going to keep watching the show. I'm just kind of curious where it's going to go. I like sitcoms, and this one is palatable to me. It's not too crazy.
I'll give it a shot, but it was pain. I'm not a sitcom guy, and it was painful. The first 2 minutes.
It is really strange to like go from something like Breaking Bad or something like that.
I'm
where it's all
watching Better Call Saul right now.
It's
So
like very realistic, right?
Yeah.
And then you switch to something like this, and it's like laugh track. It's like set up catchphrase, something like
Bazinga.
that. Yeah. That was the last sitcom. That was the last one. Yeah. No, it's he's giving me the signal now that we need to go.
That's the Matt signal.
That's the Matt time. But yeah, I'm interested in seeing where it goes.
Yeah.
Man, I'm trying. I had like a good question to end on, and now I can't remember what it was. Thanks, Matt.
Now we got to end on dementia. Don't do meth, kids.
Don't talk to your doctor.
Just talk to your dealer. He'll get you the good
Anyway,
shit.
that 70s show, that 90s show, and the ultimate show of all, the Forest Creek podcast. You can find us on Spotify and YouTube, and I just put us up in a bunch of other places, from Pandora to Stitcher to Pocket Cast to Castbox to all these other places. You just hook up with one good distributor, and it gets that RSS feed everywhere, except Apple.
Just Google Podcasts. Raph will find you.
Google Podcasts actually has us now. Yeah, Google, literally Google Podcasts.
I was verbing it, but nice.
You can find us also on social media, on Twitter at The Forest Creek, on Instagram at The Forest Creek, and we just got a Substack. That's right, theforestcreek.substack.com.
Stack those subs.
Yeah, it's a cool platform for putting out writing and podcasting, so we're going to experiment with it. We got lots of interesting stuff coming, from podcasts to videos, and if you are launching a business, a ministry, a hobby, a foundation, if you've got a cause that you're working for, if you've got a dream, let us help you make that dream come true. The Forest Creek Media Production is coming to you very soon. You can contact us at theforestcreek@gmail.com and we can see how we can bring that dream to the screen. We'd love to help you out. We're actually in the stage of making a few pro bonos right now, so you might even get it entirely free if you contact us quick.
Scholarship.
Hell yeah. We got other cool stuff coming. Jared and I are actually going to go see Tim Dillon at the Queen Elizabeth Theater later this February. When John Wick comes out. AD and I have been preparing. We've been training to get into the theater to see that movie. But that's still down the road. That's late March. We got a lot of very interesting things in the works.
Wait, when are you seeing Tim Dillon?
February 24th at the Queen Elizabeth.
Me and Jared are seeing Sam Morril on February 2nd.
Oh, sweet. Sam Morril's in town. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, just gotta take a picture of him with me.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I love doing that, especially if like people don't know the comedian very much. You could still sneak up there and be like, can we meet him? And then you can go and take. But that's how I got the first picture with Tim. Quick, fun little story. Our most popular video on YouTube is Jared and I reviewing Tim Dillon's Netflix special, A Real Hero. But on the cover of the podcast, I put up a picture of when Jared and I went to go see Tim at Rick Bronson's right before COVID. And so I have a picture of me and Tim, and I put that up there, and people thought Tim was on the show.
I remember that.
It's our biggest YouTube video because of that mistake.
So we'll use Sam Morril the Dragonman for the next one.
This time, we're not going to put up any picture, and we'll actually interview Tim Dillon.
No one watches it.
Lots of fun stuff coming up. We're working very hard to launch the business side, so stay in touch, stay in the loop, stay in the forest. And from all the generations, from the boomers to the Xers and Ys, or I guess as millennials, to the Zoomers and beyond, this has been the Forest Creek Podcast. See you later.
Laugh track.
I'll put it in.
Hello, Wisconsin!